I'm Pastor Aaron Harris, and this video is about if you should refinance your mortgage and how you should refinance your mortgage. Let's get started. The top 3 reasons that people refinance their mortgage is to lower their interest rates, lower their monthly payments, and to cash out their money. During the pandemic in 2020, 2021, and 2022, interest rates were extremely low. So people were able to come out with 2%, 3%, and 4% interest rates. So a lot of people were buying homes and refinancing. But today, the average interest rate for a 15-year mortgage is 7%, and the average interest rate for a 30-year mortgage is 8%. So a general rule of thumb is you never want to refinance and pay a higher interest rate than you're already paying. That just doesn't make sense. But I can tell you ways that you can still have access to your resources. So the best advice that I have if your interest rate is below 8% is for you to hold off on your refinancing. But if you really need to refinance at this time for various reasons, then you have 2 options that don't include doing a total refinance. And those 2 options is for you to take out a home equity loan, which is a second mortgage on your home, or a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. And I'll tell you which one is best for you. The reason that you would go get a second mortgage or a home equity loan instead of refinancing your whole loan is so that you can keep that lower interest rate locked in. For example, if you owe $300,000 on your home and you have a 4% interest rate, then you would not want to refinance and pull that $300,000 into an 8% interest rate. The reason is because 4% of $300,000 is $12,000, which means when you have 4% interest rate on $300,000, you will pay about $12,000 that year in interest. But if you have 8% interest rate on $300,000, now you'll pay $24,000 in interest. So you do not want to pay significantly more in interest rates. Instead, if you pulled out a home equity loan of $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, then you would have your first mortgage, which is still at 4%, and you would get your second mortgage at about 8%. And the benefit of that is that you're paying 8% interest on a part of what you owe instead of paying 8% on all that you owe. And what you can do is you can pay off the higher interest loan early. You can make extra payments to that second mortgage so that you can pay it off early and then only focus on your first mortgage that you have. A second option that you have instead of refinancing your whole loan is by going and having a HELOC. A HELOC is a home equity line of credit. A HELOC will give you access to a certain amount of money for a certain period of time, and you can pull it out as you need it, and you only pay interest on the amount of money that you pull out. For example, you may get a HELOC that tells you you have access, you have a line of credit of $100,000, and you can use that for about 12 months. That means within 12 months, you can pull out as much money as you want, up to $100,000, and you'll pay interest on the amount of money that you pulled out until that loan is dissolved or until you fully pay that loan back. A HELOC usually have a highest interest rate associated to it or attached to it than a home equity loan. And a home equity loan gives you all the money at once as a lump sum, or as a HELOC, you can pull out a little bit at a time. So you can go and ask an investor and look into it to see which is better for you, to get a HELOC or to go and get a home equity loan, which is a second mortgage. But I guarantee you that if your interest rate is significantly lower, if you have a 3%, 4%, 5% interest rate, that it would be in your best interest to not go and refinance the whole loan, but to go and just refinance part of a loan by taking a home equity line of credit or going and doing a HELOC. So some people want to know, when should they refinance so that they can get a lower interest rate? And the rule of thumb is usually that when you can get a 1% difference in your interest rate, when you cut your interest by at least 1%, then it is in your best interest to refinance. For example, if you could go from 10% to 9% or from 9% to 8% by refinancing, then usually that will be a good option for you, as long as you plan to be in that establishment or that place or hold that loan for a few years. Some people would like to refinance because they have an ARM loan, which is an adjustable rate mortgage, which is a variable rate, which means that the interest that you pay varies dependent on what's going on in our economy. And that means that your interest rates can go through the roof. Instead, what people usually like to do is they like to refinance and make sure that they get a fixed rate so that their rate does not continue to increase. Or if someone is at a fixed rate and rates are drastically going down, then they may want to switch to an adjustable rate mortgage so that they can get much better interest. But I'll always recommend going with a fixed rate. That way you know what you're paying and you do not have any surprises. Some people refinance so they can get rid of PMI. PMI is a penalty that you pay for not having a 20% down payment down when you go and get certain types of loans. So people will wait till their home gets enough equity and then they refinance so they can get rid of that PMI. So that is another reason that people will go and want to refinance. Another way that people lower costs is by going and stretching out their loan term. For example, if someone has been paying on a house for 10 years and they have 20 years left of payments, then maybe they'll go back and refinance and go to a 30-year loan, which will bring their payments down a little bit. I wouldn't recommend this because the goal should be to pay your home off. Imagine what you can do with your resources, with your finances, how much saving, investing you could do if you did not have to worry about a mortgage payment. So if your interest rate was really low, like a 3% or maybe even a 4%, it may make sense to stretch out those loans and to use those resources to invest or do other things. But with interest rates so high, above 7%, 8%, then really what you would get in most investments is not outpacing what you're definitely going to pay in interest. So the best thing to do is just to go ahead and to pay off the home when your interest is really high. And the third most common reason that people refinance is because they want to get equity out of their home. They want to cash out. And people do this so that they can make investments. Maybe they want to invest in a business or other properties. People do this because they want to remodel their home. Some people do it because they have a lot of debt and they want to do some debt consolidation. And so these are reasons that people go ahead and say, I want to cash out. But remember that refinancing is not free. You usually pay about 2 to 3% of the overall total loan in order to refinance. So you may have to pay 5, 10, 15, $20,000 just to refinance a loan. So you have to make sure that it is worth it, and it's not worth it if you plan on moving within the next year or two, because you usually will not recuperate all of your money. And another thing you have to remember is that these lenders get paid off of commission. They get paid when you refinance. So when you talk about refinancing, the more money you refinance, the more money they get, the more commission they get. So people will go and encourage you to refinance as much money as you can, but do not listen to them. Do not do it. Make sure that you go ahead and do your research. I know of someone that had about 10 years left on their 30-year mortgage, and they had about a 4% interest rate, and they owed a little under $200,000, and all they wanted was to take out $100,000 to do some remodeling for their home. Someone recommended that they refinance to a 30-year loan at an 8% interest rate. They said that their mortgage would go up $300 every month, and they said this with a smile on their face as if they were doing them a favor. So let's do the math. Let's say that this person's mortgage was around $3,000, and he wants this person to add an additional 20 years to that mortgage. So when you add $36,000 a year for 20 years, that is an additional $720,000. In addition to that, it would have been an additional $300 a month for 30 years, which is $108,000. So to put this in perspective, in order to take out a $100,000 loan to remodel, this person would have had to pay back an additional $828,000 on top of what they were already paying. And that's how we get trapped in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, because some people are not educated when they're making financial decisions. And that's why this channel is here, so that you can be informed and make good financial decisions and not lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars because we're following the advice of people who have an incentive to get paid off of the decisions that you make. So I want you to make good decisions. I want you to make wise decisions. I want you to calculate what it will cost you if you refinance, because one of the goals that I have for myself and that I have for you is for you to be able to pay the mortgage off so that you can free up those resources and use them where you want them. I know that many people, once they get their equity in their home, they want to move to a bigger home, or they want to get some cash out and remodel their home or do some things with their home. And I know that whenever someone buys a new home, we throw them a housewarming party and we bring gifts and we celebrate them. What we really should celebrate is not when people buy a home, because that just means you have payments for the next 15 or 30 years. We should really celebrate when someone pays a home off, because that means that you're really able to make some financial moves that will benefit yourself, your family, your church, your future, and generations to come. So if you learned something from this video, then continue watching my videos, which is all about financial literacy.